Hey everybody, this is my African tank, and as many of you are aware, I have recently purchased a larger tank, a much larger tank, and it's going to be the home of all these fish. I'm moving the entire community out of this tank and putting it in the larger tank, which will then open up this tank, which is a 40 breeder, for me to do some other things with. And I don't know when I do that if I'm going to actually change the scape, replant it, strip it out, or just kind of clean it up and keep it going the way it is. I'm leaning towards keeping it mostly the way it is. So I'm going to be documenting my process here as I put my new tank together. But I figure since it's basically going to be what I guess we could think of as my new African tank, even though this is not a true African biotope, I'm aware of that. Let's talk about this tank and why I set this tank up and how I set it up and so on and so forth, because there's going to be some changes to the new tank. Not so much aesthetically, just sort of mechanically. If you'll notice, it's very crowded in there. I've got a lot of rock work. I've got a lot of cave structure. If nothing else, there's just trap after trap after trap for detritus to build up in there. So things like that are going to get taken into consideration. The amount of light that is needed for the kinds of plants. I've got some stuff down there that I planted very enthusiastically that's barely hanging on in the bottom. I'm honestly surprised any of that stuff down at the bottom, and don't ask me what the names of most of it are. I can't even remember. I just bought stuff that I liked and stuck it in there and hoped for the best. A lot of my tanks are like that. As Jeff B. once said, he throws everything at the wall and sees what sticks. I kind of do that with my plants, and I've come to find several plants that I like, that tend to work in my tanks with my tank personality, as I've talked about before, the types of maintenance schedules I run, and whether or not I'm willing to supplement and add foods and so on and so forth. So I find that I've got known stuff to work with now, as opposed to when I set this tank up. I was just kind of going for it. But plants aside, let's talk about the scape. Let's talk about the hardscape. This is the first tank I ever really sat down and put any thought into. And I've told the story about how I've acquired the wood in there before. If I can find that video again, I'll attach a card if you're interested in watching the video. But there was a little bit of sentimental value to the wood in there, and even the rocks in there I collected from a very special place to me that I like to go hike. Now, why did I set it up the way I set it up? One is I like a very natural look. I shot a video yesterday where I went out rock collecting, and I kind of looked around and said, this is all my inspiration. You, of course, didn't get a lifetime of seeing what the bones of the earth around here look like and seeing what the underwater structure looks like in the lakes and the rivers that I fish in. And I do, so I know, what I'm looking at when I stick my head underwater somewhere. It wouldn't really be a whole lot different than what we're looking at right here, depending on, of course, where we were sticking our head under the water. Now, aesthetically, I'm no artist. I don't know any rules. I do what works for me and what I like. And if it's done to some kind of structure, I guess that's okay, but it's not deliberate. I do what works for me. And I spent about a week putting this tank together. I'm kind of wondering how long it's going to take me to do the new one. It should be interesting. If something's not right for me, and I may not even be able to define what it is that bugs me, but if something just isn't positioned right, it'll be like an itch I can't scratch until I fix it. And I spent about a week doing that with this tank until I got everything right where I liked it, and I'm absolutely in love with this tank. One of the effects I went for was the sort of natural feel that you would get. I know you can't tell because everything's all overgrown with the offwalks in there, but these rocks here are all the same material. I'm not a geologist either. I couldn't tell you what those rocks are made out of, but they're the same thing. They're all the same rock. They're the same color, same structure. And if you actually look at the way they're positioned and you look at the way they're broken and the lines go, that very much goes in the line of the eye, and it goes very naturally to what you might see out in the stream bed somewhere. The other rocks are also laid in there. Now, of course, I do have to make some compromises. That rock right there is kind of obviously laid over the end of the piece of wood, so you can't see the sawed off end of it. So there are some practical compromises that are involved with it. This actually hides some of the more flat rocks that I've got in the back to create a cave system. There's 3 or 4 caves back there, believe it or not. I don't know why I'm not focusing here. And the glass is really dirty too. I apologize. The camera's actually probably trying to focus on all the green that's on the glass. I'm going to be breaking this tank down soon enough, so I'm not really worried about doing a whole lot of maintenance on it right now. I just did a water change recently, so the water's clean enough. I don't care about all that green algal growth. That's going to be gone in due time. But the rocks behind that wood don't look quite so natural, and I've actually got that wood to hide it. I've also left an area in the middle that gives some open swimming space. I've also given some structure high up and then in the middle to give the fish multiple things to swim up and over and around to better increase the sense of depth. And if you will look at the way the lines of the wood go, this one is coming this way, and we've got all our lines are going back towards the center, and that creates the illusion, to me anyway, of much more depth in the tank than there already is. It's an 18-inch deep tank, but with the way that wood is structured like that, it actually draws the eye in even deeper and gives the appearance of a much, much deeper tank. So I've got some open swimming area. I've got some areas that the floating plants can move around. I've also got the wood close enough to the surface that the roots from the floating plants can actually come in contact with and anchor them so that they don't just keep swirling and floating around the tank all the time. A lot more thought has gone into this tank than me just throwing stuff in there in a way that looks good. Now, this was my first tank that I really ever designed and put together. My angelfish tank, and I'm really still not happy with this. This tank's going to be undergoing some minor revamping here very soon. But I just basically piled rocks in there that looked in, a nice way, and I just went for like mad caveage. I tried to make sure, like, if I have 100 little fish in here that all want their own little space, will they have it? Sure. I have actually removed probably more than half of the amount of rocks that I had in here. I had such a tremendous amount of rocks in there. I'm really kind of surprised I didn't blow the bottom of the tank out with the weight of the rocks that were piled up in there. But again, it wasn't anything that was really planned. This is another one that wasn't really planned, but it was kind of planned. You've still got that sort of stacked up feeling where the rocks are kind of laid on top of each other, but that's not too unnatural looking to me. The lines all work for me. It gives the animals plenty of place to hide, because again, this isn't actually the real world. This is my aquarium. I do have to work with keeping it clean, making sure the animals are have places to live and hide. And let me make it clear, that is first and foremost my consideration. It should be everybody's consideration. I'm not setting up a photograph on the wall. I'm setting up a habitat for animals to live in. And that is the top consideration. If you have animals that need, ground floor apartments, like my catfish here, make sure you have them. If you have, in my case, I have about 11 loaches in this tank, and I've got a million little nooks and crannies for them to all hide in and have their own little space when they need it. So, the floating plants keep the gouramis calmed down. It gives them something to hide under and gives them a sense of security. So that's all part of, I start there and then I work around what else is going to be in the tank. So with my African tank, I went for very lush, I went for very African-y feeling, or at least what I would imagine the Congo to be like, since those are Congo tetras. Now, I have no idea where that Synodontis comes from. I know it's one of the ones that can live in more neutral water and softer water. It's not a really hard water fish, which is why it can stay in my tank. And I'm honestly not sure where the Tenopoma comes from in Africa. I'm assuming the Congo tetras come from the Congo, hence the name, and that's why I went for this very verdant sort of lush tank. The next tank is probably not going to be lush, as lush. This is one I just sort of slapped together recently. It was not intended for the fish that are in it, but the fish that are in it have ended up in it. And this guy right here is actually the one that is going to be going in the tank we're looking at now. My 40 breeder is going to go from my African tank to my T-bar tank. And that is going to be the chief fish in the tank. And I'm going to set up a community around that T-bar. So that is also something to look forward to for updates in the near future. Subscribe now if you have not already. Plenty of updates coming. So once that T-bar is out of there, and those angelfish are only temporarily in there too, once they've grown up a little and are of size, they will be going over here into my angelfish tank. That guy right there is really aggressive, so he'll be coming out, etc., etc. I'm not going to try to make this into an update video, but lots and lots and lots of stuff going on here in the fish room as usual, and getting this tank broken down more or less, at least the community removed and put into their new home, is going to be the linchpin. Once I do that, the dominoes will start falling, and I'll be able to start moving this fish and that fish, and all the tanks will start coming into line, and the updates will really start rolling. This tank's not being messed with at all in any way. I kind of considered taking her out of here, my snakeskin, because she's getting really big, but I'm not having any issues with this tank. Nobody's fighting, nobody seems overcrowded, so I'm going to let that ride for the time being. But this is where they are eventually heading. So I've mentioned before that what you're looking at there as far as what's in the tank is just some stuff to give my brain something to chew on and get the creative juices flowing. That's not necessarily how this is going to look by any means when I'm done. So that's what I've got to work with. I've already got a few rocks. I don't know how well it's turning out with the low light. But I got my hands full. That's a lot of tank. It's a really lot of tank. It's 6 feet long. It is 19 inches deep, or almost 19 inches deep, and it is 23 inches tall, I believe. So it's 125 gallons, and my African fish are going to swim around in there like little guppies in a swimming pool. It's going to seem. So I'm really excited. Like I say, I got a lot on my plate, but that's what makes this hobby so fun. And once again, thanks to my wife's generosity, I was able to get this tank as soon as I was, and we're going to get started on it real soon. So subscribe now, and you don't miss any updates. There's going to be plenty of them coming, as I've already mentioned. So thanks for watching this one, and I'll see you real soon.